Hello, in this video, I'll show you how to create a raised garden bed using pressure-treated landscaping timber. I used a total of 9 boards, each 8 feet in length. 3 of the boards I cut in half to 4 feet. The boards were 4 inches wide and 2 3/4 inch thick. I used a rabbet joint to connect all of the corners of the garden bed together. I'm using a speed square to mark a 4-inch section that I'll cut out of each end of the boards. This is what's going to form the tongue of the rabbet joint. I use a circular saw to cut the line that I just marked with a speed square. Again, this line is 4 inches back from the edge of the board. I only want to cut halfway through the board, and the thickness of the board is 2 3/4 inch. So I set the blade on the circular saw to not cut deeper than 1 3/8 inch. Then I flip the board around so that I can cut the 4-inch tongue on the other end as well. I make sure that the notches that I'm cutting into the board on each end are on the same side of the board. This way I won't have rabbet joints facing opposite directions. With the back edge of the rabbet joint cut, I now have to cut the rest of the wood out so that we'll have a clear rabbet joint. To do this, I rotated the boards 90 degrees and then clamped 3 boards together so I can make them a little bit faster. I drew a line from the back of the rabbet joint to the end of the board, right down the middle. I use this line as a guide for the next circular saw cut. In this orientation, the wood that I'm trying to cut through is 4 inches. My circular saw blade won't do a 4-inch cut, so I'm going to have to cut half of the wood, flip the board over, and cut the other side. To have the 2 cuts meet in the middle, I set the circular saw blade depth to be just over 2 inches. I cut both ends on all 3 boards before I flip the boards over. I used the clamps to flip all of the boards over together at the same time. Then I make the final cut on both ends of all 3 boards to form the rabbet joint. With all the cuts made, I use a chisel and a hammer to fully clear out the tongue. It's okay if the circular saw cuts didn't perfectly align because the chisel and hammer will still make sure that we get this wood removed. Once I have rabbet joints cut on both ends of all the boards, I level out the area that I place the garden bed. As a reminder, I'm using 6 8-foot boards and 6 4-foot boards. For the first layer of the garden bed frame, I place the 8-foot boards with the tongue face up. For the next 2 layers of the raised garden bed, I'll be placing the 8-foot boards with the tongue face down. I fit the first layer together and make sure that it's fully level. I used a scrap piece of the landscaping timber to support any areas that needed quite a bit of lift. Then I packed extra dirt around the block so it wouldn't spill out from underneath the bed. I used a speed square to make sure that the corners of the first layer of the bed were square, and then I drilled a wood screw through the rabbet joint. I checked the next corner for square before drilling another wood screw through the rabbet joint. After I had 1 screw on each side, I added an additional screw on each side, but I waited to add the second screw until I already had both sides fully squared. I screwed together all 4 corners of the first layer of the raised garden bed before starting to build the second layer. I pre-drilled the holes of the next layer, and then I added a screw through the tongue of the rabbet joint. This particular board had a bit of warp to it, so I checked for level before attaching the second screw. I used 2-inch wood screws to go through both of the tongues that we cut out. I also alternated the corners that I was attaching the wood screws in, that way I wouldn't hit a wood screw in a layer underneath. I repeated this same process with the short board on the other side of the garden bed. Then I slotted the 8-foot long boards into place. With the 2 8-foot long boards in place, I then followed the same process as the layer underneath. I pre-drilled a hole and then screwed a wood screw through the tongues and alternating corners from the layer underneath. Then I attached the third and final layer of the short boards on each side of the garden bed. Finally, I slot in the top 2 pieces of the 8-foot boards. I used the same process of pre-drilling the hole and then attaching wood screws through the 2 tongues. I do this on all 4 corners. Next, I attach a 5/8 inch drill bit on an extension to my drill. Then I drill through the center of all the rabbet joints in each corner. I use this step to construct the raised garden bed because we just attached all of the boards together, but it's not attached to the ground. To attach the frame to the ground and keep it from moving, I'm going to use 1/2 inch diameter rebar. There are a couple key steps to drill the hole all the way through the wood boards. First, the length of the drill bit and the extension needs to be longer than the entire height of the garden bed. This way, I'll make sure I can get through all the wood. Second, I make sure to regularly pull the drill out of the hole so that all of the wood chips in the hole can be cleared. The extension that I'm using on the drill bit is a press fit, so sometimes when I pull up on the drill bit comes out of it. That's fine because I'm able to just press right back onto the drill bit and reconnect it to the drill. Once I've drilled fully through the wood boards, I slot the rebar into the holes. Because we used a drill bit slightly larger than the diameter of the rebar should fit tight but not too snug. I use a hammer to push the rebar all the way into the ground. Now that the raised garden bed is fully assembled, it's time to fill it. I start out by placing landscaping fabric over the wood. I use the landscaping fabric so that none of the dirt or plants will come out between the layers of the wood. I'm intentionally not going to place landscaping fabric across the bottom of the garden bed. That way, any of the plants that I plant will have the opportunity to grow really deep roots. I use a stapler to attach the landscaping fabric to the wood frame, and then I trim off the excess landscaping fabric. Once the inside of the garden bed is lined with landscaping fabric, I start to fill the bed. Since this is a really large area bed, I want to be cost efficient on what I'm filling with, so I start by filling with organic matter from the yard. These are a bunch of dried sticks and twigs that we had collected from the yard before. I spread the sticks out into an even layer, and then I start filling the bed with a soil mixture. The topsoil in the area that I live in has a lot of clay and not a lot of nutrients, so I'm going to have to supplement the soil. Because of this, I'm going to fill the rest of the garden bed with a mix of 30% topsoil, 40% garden soil purchased from a store, and 30% compost. I use a rake to mix together the topsoil, garden soil, and compost, and to spread everything into an even layer. Then I top the garden bed with about a 2-inch layer of mushroom compost. I heavily water the garden bed and let the water soak in for at least an hour before I plant anything. Now the garden bed is ready to be filled. Thanks for watching this video on how to make a raised garden bed from pressure-treated landscaping timber. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe to see more content.